Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up. Hello, Ben.
Hi, Jeremy. Happy Friday.
Friday-ish.
Ish.
We are wet and rainy Friday. We are. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we look at everything to do with the London market, technology, change, innovation. We're going to focus on the London's leading broker survey and report, Ben, a bit later. But as always, we have the news. Now, I would actually, Ben, before we start, I got you this. I thought you'd like this. You love a firework, don't you?
Ooh.
Look. Ooh. Oh, so yeah, it's bonfire night this weekend. So I thought I'd play some fireworks.
They're lovely.
I don't know whether any fireworks will go off this weekend. It's so wet.
I mean, it's always wet, though, isn't it?
It is always wet.
Perfect bonfire night weather.
Just before we get started, I remember the Millennium, and I was up north, and we thought, oh, we'll go to Liverpool Docks because they're going to have a massive firework display. And at 11:30, they cancelled it because it was too wet and windy. So we just went home.
That's terrible.
That was it.
I didn't think. I thought they're all done by computers these days, aren't they? They just set them off no matter what the weather. But
yeah, there we go.
I like fireworks.
Yeah, I like them too. Yeah. Right, let's get into this. So I normally start with the news, Ben, but I'm going to hand over to you because you found an interesting piece about self-driving cars, which I thought we'd kick off with.
Yep, this has been a recurring topic on B&B, and I thought I'd draw it out again because I think it does. I think the story of these self-driving cars, it's sort of interesting and it's endless copy for journalists when they've got nothing else to write about. But here in the UK is Harwell Science Park, where they're doing some, as you can see, in association with Aviva, who is the insurer of choice for these driverless test cars. And this is obviously UK. We talked about the last lot. We're in Silicon Valley in San Francisco, and that gets a lot of attention too. Anyway, this story in the FT is about the continuing difficulties of insurers and insurance for self-driving cars, and really. The thing is that what seems to be going on is there's almost a sort of schism in the industry over whether this is a big risk or not. And some of it is to do with the fact of whether software is better than people, which is the old perennial debate. Is software safer than people? And interestingly, there's quite a debate under this article with some interesting points. And what the main point of this article, though, is that insurers are worried about this unknown risk. In other words, they don't know what the risks are going to be. They can't work them out. There could be a new class of claims by drivers against insurers, they're thinking. Does the manufacturer take entire responsibility? Do you just give everybody first-party insurance? The other issue, which is causing, it's surprising perhaps, is causing problems, is that the manufacturers of the cars themselves are first of all, they own the data, the car data, the driving data. And of course, in any claim, that driving data will be critical to assessing who was responsible and where the liabilities are. Now, insurers say they can look at how far the car has skidded or what it's hit and make assessments from that. But really, it's the car's software that will tell them what went wrong or what didn't. But of course, unsurprisingly, the manufacturers are reluctant to hand this over because it's their IP, it's their innovation data. And I presume they open themselves up to all sorts of liabilities if they just hand that data over to insurers. So I can see the problem, and currently they're under no obligation to do that. So that's another big kind of issue potentially here. They have said that they're talking about potentially giving insurers slimmed down packages of information for critical information for use in accidents. And anyway, so it sort of rumbles on, this story about whether insurance will be a big block to driverless cars or self-driving cars. And so there was some talk here about Tesla as well, which now is underwriting its own cars insurance policies in several states in the US. So they seem confident. And
that was the 2 points I was just going to bring out, is that do you think we already know that these big tech firms behind these vehicles probably have a big enough balance sheet to underwrite some of this stuff themselves? And I also think that when we think about this, I think we think of cars in the way that we use them today. You jump in, you get on the motorway, and you drive at 70 miles an hour. Whereas I think the evolution of self-driving vehicles will start fairly small scale in kind of low risk environments. So I'm thinking city centers where, the maximum, it's a little bit like e-bikes, they can go at 17 miles an hour. And of course, if you get hit at 17 miles an hour, it's going to hurt, but it's not going to be somebody, taking control and driving madly through the street. So I think there'll be an evolution. I also, and the thing that you said about them believing the technology, I think there is a belief, there are a bunch of people who believe that technology and the safety measures they're put in place will actually save lives. And so I think one of the problems, I think, is how we feel about an accident if it's not caused by another human.
You're right, and I think I suppose most of the debate that's around this article is the same debate that we have with technology in any field of just insurance that we look at. Is really what's this balance between the human element and then the technology element, and what does what you're saying is, what does the technology enable you to do? So you're right, I think it will evolve, and I think that's one of the discussions, which is, why do people even need to get into these cars if lots of the trips are really just for sending the car somewhere to pick something up or whatever? You don't need to actually have a human in there. So therefore, by doing that, you reduce the problem by not having, it would just be pieces of metal crashing, not killing people. And the other thing, of course, as you say, if you limit speeds, which you can try and do with humans, but they tend to break laws, whereas cars don't. You take out the potential for them to kill people or to seriously injure people. So I think there's huge, there's kind of arguments on both sides. The other thing is, I don't think it's binary. It's like pilots, the sort of myth that planes just land themselves and things like that. Well, actually, they don't. Pilots tend to land them and do the takeoff, and if any problems arise, the pilots take over. So the human element is very important in all these things. When the computer, which are essentially stupid, needs that human intervention. And there's actually a joke under this about what do you need in a pilotless plane? You need a pilot and a dog and the plane. And they said, why do you need the dog? Well, the dog is there to bite the pilot if he goes to touch any of the controls. So so that kind of sums up in a way what the thing is. Is it binary? I think the insurers are tending to see, as they often do, to say, well, the binary situation is all these cars will be on the road doing what they do currently as humans drive them, instead of an evolution where they are, as you say, used in lots and lots of different ways which are appropriate and not entailing huge risk. So I think you're right. I think you've got it right, which is that it will develop appropriately, and these things won't be herring around the roads at great speeds. Because you can control them, of course. Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Good. Okay, great. Thanks, Ben. Nice start. I'll tell you what, we haven't played this for a while, so why don't we play this jingle?
What's the word on the data stream? On the data stream.
It's too good not to play. So let's jump straight in. This is a tenuous link to data, but yeah, this is really interesting, isn't it? This Carlisle.
It's another one that we've been following. So this is Carlisle, which is a very big, one of the biggest leasing operators, aircraft leasing operators in the world. Basically suing a lot of insurers for $700 million. So $700 million from 30 insurers. They've presumably because it's Florida's pro this sort of claim, and a bit of litigation. It's in Florida. Anyway, it's quite complicated, but it's complicated when you read this story. But essentially, this is all about the planes that have been seized in Russia or by Russia, and one in Egypt for some inexplicable reason. But there's one in Egypt.
Oh, right.
I don't know why. And of course, the Russians are not saying anything. They've not given them back. There's no signal that they will or they won't. So it's stasis in a way. There's 500 aircraft now worth $10 billion held by Russians. So it's a huge.
Wow.
Yeah, it's huge. And what Carlisle is basically saying, and why they've launched this litigation, is that they are saying that the insurers are just sitting on their hands doing nothing. They've made no assessment of loss, and they've made no payments, and they won't make any payments. And I think this is why they're so frustrated and why they've gone to court over it, which is that they're saying for these 16 Boeing planes, 7 Airbus planes, so these 35 insurers, they say, and there's a consortium, a war consortium in London, and there's 19 other syndicates. So lots of our muckers are involved in all of this. Really, it's certainly interesting. And I know we'll get no one on to talk about this because it is just such a horrible situation. I think I could see both sides of this, which is that the Carlisle is saying we have done nothing wrong. We have an insurance policy in place. We should have been paid out, and there should have been an assessment of loss made. The insurers are saying, but we can't make an assessment of loss because we don't know whether these planes are coming back or not, or what the loss will be. We can't really judge what it is. So what are we going to do? Just pay out some money for a guess?
Yeah.
And in a way, it's intractable. I don't know what will happen. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the case. I'm sure the insurers will claim, well, until we've got proof of loss and we've actually got the fact that these planes are never going to come back, then would we pay out? But Carlisle will rightly probably say, well, we should have some sort of compensation because that's exactly what an insurance policy is supposed to do. So anyway, I don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, quite an interesting one though for the courts to decide on. And I'm sure it'll be, it's in America, but it won't be kind of like the UK with case law, but it will probably set precedents, I think, for how these sorts of things are dealt with. I remember that it's a shame we can't get someone like Bruce on. We will, Bruce Carman, he's more certainly would be a kind of expert on this, but I remember that when the Malaysian aircraft was lost and others were lost, there were payouts on those planes as they were lost, but I think that was more definitive. I mean, in terms of the insurers, they were prepared to say, yeah, of course, we're 99.9% certain this plane has disappeared into the ocean, and that's that, and it's a total loss. Here, though, we have got planes that are just sitting somewhere. And while it is 10 billion, if they come back or they're retrieved or there's some kind of peace deal or something in the next 2 years, then it's not a 10 billion loss. It's maybe much less than that. So it's a very interesting story, and I think it's a very it tells you quite a lot about insurance when something is just sort of held and you don't know what's happening, and it's a bit like any assessment of a loss. You need to have the loss proven, I guess.
Yeah. I'll tell you who we should get on to talk about this. Paul Wordley. He'd be, I'm sure he'd have an interesting angle from a legal point of
Yeah.
view, and the ripples across the ocean and what perhaps the implications are. Directly.
Yes. I mean, actually, I suppose 700 million is. You might say it's not a lot against the 10 billion. I mean, I know this is not all the planes, but maybe there is some, and spread across 30 insurers. I don't think that's necessarily material to balance sheets of those insurers or those carriers, but it's still a lot of money. And the question for me would be, is there not a way in which you can kind of do some kind of interim type of payment in these situations to say there is a loss of some kind? And I guess that's just a negotiation. In the end, you do a deal and say it's fair to say that there will be some kind of loss and we're prepared to do that. But when we have proof of what the final outcome is, there'll be a further payment, or that will be it. So I mean, I don't know, but it seems.
And we don't know, but I'm just reflecting back on London Market claims a few weeks ago, and one of the key things that Julia Graham was saying from AirMic was communication and having lines of communication, from the start of a claim throughout the process is key. And maybe with so many people and stakeholders involved, maybe that communication hasn't been clear, or it's broken down, or it needs, that's quite interesting as well.
It's a really good point. I just don't know whether it's. I mean, I'll ask around and see what people say privately. I think, and come back next week, but I do suspect that there is where does the conversation go if an insurer is saying, look, we don't know where it's gone, or it's the communication sort of ends at a certain point, which is, no, we're not going to pay out money until we know what's happening, and the other lot going, well, we've got the policy and you should pay out money, and it sort of ends at an impasse, doesn't it? And so maybe that's what's happened, or maybe this is just part of the whole process of a company with a policy of this scale kicking the thing into action and saying we've got to have something. Which often is what legal process does. I'm sure there's lots of technical legal aspects to this, but legal process often is just litigation is a way of saying we're going to force you to sit around the table. And the secret to litigation is, at what point do you decide you'll make a payout? What's the optimal point? So I don't know. It's interesting though, and it will go on.
We will keep an eye on that. Thanks. Thank you, Ben. Right, let's move on. So I found something pretty interesting this week. It's not really news, but this came through on Slipcase, which published by the Independent, and then they put on the byline saying this is nothing to do with us, which I always think is funny. But basically, in this article, they are saying, obviously, that as businesses become more reliant on digital technology in order to run their operations, then they are more open to risks from either the digital technology breaking down or malicious kind of activity that gets into their system. And they identify ransomware, accidental disruption, and then third parties, their systems breaking down. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And what I was thinking when I was reading this article, that the perspective is always from an insurer on how they can help their clients with these risks. And they don't often see articles where they're pointing the mirror at themselves and saying, well, what's our resilience and agility like in operations? And then I also saw this report by McKinsey and Company this week, which was saying kind of the role of chief operating officer is increasing in firms. And I think there's a correlation between these two articles, in that as you become more reliant on digital technologies and digital operations, then you need to have somebody with responsibility for that, and that will fall on the shoulders of ops and IT, and therefore they become more strategic in the kind of forum. So in this report, they're just saying that basically they were pretty unfashionable for the last 15 years, but they're making a comeback. And I guess also you can throw into the mix the disruption caused by the pandemic, and probably highlighted their reliance or their need to invest in more digital technology in order to operate in difficult trading conditions. And then they just highlight kind of 5 kind of key areas that ops directors need to think about to be effective in the future. Most of these are obvious. So anticipating change, collaboration, sure, engaging with the board, okay. So there's a couple though that are interesting. So drive operational excellence culturally and technologically. That's something that we talk about, kind of that sweet spot, bringing people along on a journey, not just forcing people, and also increasingly having this ability to manage talent creatively, as they call it there. I think we've talked a lot about it's not the war for talent anymore, Ben. We're not allowed to call it that. I've been hauled up many times. I don't know, but let's call it the talent crisis. Because of Putin's illegal invasion of, you've always got to put illegal invasion in front of that. Anyway, there is a talent crisis
as opposed to a legal invasion.
Yeah, that's it. Because that's what we did in Iraq.
You're allowed to do it. Yeah,
that was fine. Anyway, we're drifting. So their kind of role needs to encompass talent and be able to find, I guess, from an operations point of view, looking at your operations and going, is this a good place to work operationally? Do the systems work? Are they intuitive? Or do they have to go on a training course for 2 weeks in order to understand how the CRM system works? So I just thought it was really interesting, kind of those 2 articles coming out at the same time.
It is. I think, for me, the COO role has always been an odd role. So, for example, when you have, whenever there are mergers, you find that the COO is very prominent because they're setting up the new operating model. And that's often done very quickly. But what you get after that is all the culture issues, problems with people, how you get things to work when you've got 2 different cultures, etc., etc., etc. There's a lot of things that go way beyond that, and I've always thought the COO role is too narrow, and this seems to widen it out, particularly into the people space. And actually, this week I've been talking to quite a few big tech companies about some of these issues that we're talking about, we're seeing in the data between sweet spot and all that stuff. And I think there is a sense now that actually we have to work much more around understanding that technology is an enabling, potentially, well, it could be disabling or a hindrance, but which it often is, or it could be enabling. And in fact, it's not the human thing. And if you don't get the 2 things right, then it doesn't work, and it's expensive, and it's disadvantages you competitively. So I think it is good. The trouble, I suppose, with all of this is people seem to be shared across all sorts of different functions in operations. So HR has a particular culture and viewpoint, often just quite processy, I think, a lot of it, and compliance stuff, and not always that powerful in organizations. COO is about ops, and that's kind of not about the front line of sales and development and everything else. So someone else owns that. So the talent issue gets spread across all these different roles. If it's becoming more in the operational space, then I would say there are potential advantages to that, which is in relation to technology, is making sure that people, talent, whatever we call it, it is working in concert. So in other words, technology people work effectively with the technology. They're prepped to use that technology, and they know what their role is in relation to that technology. So yeah, it could be good. Could be good. Bloody big challenge. It really is for all these organisations now to get it right, because what a lot of people are saying to me is, and we're seeing it as well, is there is just a shortage of talent now. You can't grow with just talent.
No.
So you've got to scale up and grow, which most of the people we work with do want to grow. And the sector wants to grow, and to innovate, you have to innovate to do that. You've got to have some role. The technology has to have a fairly major role. You've got to take the boring basics away and get it all done by a computer, and use fewer, better people to do that innovative growth stuff. And if you don't, you'll just stay where you are. You won't move forward.
And you will move backwards, because your talented people will look across the road and go, that looks like a more interesting organization.
And definitely, I think that one of the things will be if people look across the road and say, that place has got good tech and tools of the trade that I can use straight away. And I'm going to go there because I will have more time to do the things I enjoy and find fulfilling in this job than I do here, where I'm fighting spreadsheets and chaos and legacy and whatever else it is that's getting in the way. And that becomes frustrating and demoralizing. So I do think that there is, to me, a strong argument that says that good tech, efficient tech, and getting that right. And I think we see it in some of our results, for sure. It's hard to prove, but I think we definitely see where that balance is right. They are happier organizations. And I wonder if they find it easier to attract people.
Yeah.
That could be a campaign, an advertising campaign. We've got the best tech, come and join us.
Yeah, could be. Great. Thanks for that, Ben. Okay, let's talk about London's leading brokers. Now, this is an annual survey that you put together, Ben. I've uploaded it so I can share it. I just thought it'd be interesting if you could just kind of tell us why you do it, but also why it's so popular, I guess, with brokers as well.
So we do two what we call people reports. There's one about underwriters, the leading underwriters, which is brokers and underwriters voting for underwriters. And we do this report, which is about brokers, which is the underwriters' view of brokers, really. Now, why would we do that? Well, the reason we do it is because within London in particular, and this is true of other markets too, the way insurance works, of course, is a collaboration, really. It's got to be between sometimes competing interests, but brokers and underwriters have got to complement one another, got to work well together. And early on when we did these studies, we saw in a lot of the commentary and the feedback that you get around why people are leaders, and I'll come on to that. The thing that strikes you is just how the best people work well together. So they know what they're trying to achieve. Usually they want to sell stuff, sell products and services, and keep clients and customers happy. But they know what their role is, and they know what each of them does, and they complement each other well. So this is the broker aspect of that. And why is it popular? Because people love seeing who's doing well. We all like faces sell papers. So everybody wants to see who these people are, who the leaders are, because we can't know, right? We all sit doing our jobs and we don't know. We very rarely get told, other than through kind of formal appraisal processes, what we've achieved or what we've done. So I think it is recognition. And it's also about brand. It's particularly about brand because, and it's why it's on Insure Index, is because it's people in B2B represent, people in all industries represent them, but particularly in these high profile people really represent the brands when they're there, and they represent the values of those brands and the ambitions and everything else. So in a way, the more people a company gets in these kind of surveys, then the better, because they're out there doing the job for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know for the underwriting one we had a bit of an awards. Is there an awards for this, or is this just a report?
This is just going to be a report. We'll probably bring these together next year into an event, into our sort of annual event. Because it's just that this one comes out slightly later because we get some data a bit later. It's a timing issue, but yeah, we will probably build this into more of an awards and more building around really how people are represented in brands, and going back to that earlier conversation, that people are a really important part of it. They're not just spreadsheets or balance sheets. So it's the human element of this. If you see a bunch of photos or you go into an organization and just meet people, you get an impression of what it's like, right? Every time. I mean, you go, is this a diverse organization? Is it friendly? Are these people full of ideas? Are they bored? Are they all going to leave? All those things you get very quickly by just walking into an organization and meeting a few people. So this is, in a way, that's sort of formalized.
Yeah. No, I think it's really important. We often talk about brand is in your people and what you do on a day-to-day role. So yeah, I think it's really, really important. So I love to see it every year, Ben. So thanks for pulling that together. Any highlights in there you want to?
Yeah, we've done is some of the things I've put. There's a piece up here. I've got a piece up on InsureIndex, and if people want to download this, you just go to InsureIndex. You can just sign up and download the full report. A few things. One is, I think, perhaps one of the most notable things on bench strength is Howden is in third ahead of WTW. I don't think that. Well, I know that doesn't represent the scale of those two organisations. WTW is much bigger, but it probably does reflect the recent history. The Aon deal that didn't happen, the fact that Re was sold from WTW, and probably they'd been a bit quiet, whereas Howden has had a very active period. David Howden speaks a lot about people and how that's, what the brand represents. And that does seem to be being carried through. So those people who work for Howden do seem to be getting that recognition. So it's working for that brand quite strongly, I think. And the other one is really just around why people get chosen. Why do these broking leaders get chosen? And the top one is really client focus and understanding. So it's what do brokers get and bring, if you like, into the party with the underwriters as to what the client's looking for. And that's the biggest theme, really, in all of the stuff that we do at the moment, which is client focus. So it's good to see. And of course, then there's the second thing is knowledge. And so those two things really go hand in hand. So it's basically sales and data. If you think of that, you could think of those two things like that. One is sales is all about understanding, listening, getting to understand what the benefits to the customer or the client are, and how you sell those in. But to do that, you've got to know what your product is and what it does and what it could do. So it's interesting, and that would pretty much align with all the other kind of performance metrics we look at when we're assessing businesses.
Yeah, great. Super. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for giving us that quick overview. And like you say, you can just download that from Grace Church and InsureIndex, I guess.
Yes, you get it from InsureIndex. It's the links on the InsureIndex website. Good
stuff. Excellent. Right. What are you doing this weekend, Ben? I'm going to play the firework clip again just to...
Well, I might actually be going to a firework display on Saturday, the local authority one, hopefully. That's 1 hour out of the day. And then I think not much else because it looks a bit wet and windy and rainy.
Yeah. I am going to jump in the car and go to Daventry. I'm not going to go into now, but there won't be any fireworks. Well, I hope there's not anyway.
You never know.
Literally or metaphorically. There we are. Right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We shall see you next week. Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
Burgess and Bolton's Weekly Wrap-Up.